welcome. I'm really excited here today, obviously, to go through a little bit more, obviously, on the AI space because there's been some huge announcements that have been actually publicly broadcasted. And I think, candidly, like we were debating on, like, should we pivot what we had for content this week? And we're like, yeah, we should really talk about this because there's a lot that happened, right? And it's been something, quite candidly, that I think a lot of partners have known about in some way or have felt in some way. And I'd like to hit it head on. I'd like to have a conversation a little bit more about where Microsoft is going because there is this dichotomy right now inside of the industry where there's a lot of people that are saying AI is the future, and there's a lot of people saying that AI is not the future, right? And my role as chief AI architect, obviously, is to kind of demystify that. And I will tell you the learnings that I have gone through in the last 7 months as we've really adopted more and more of these AI-centric concepts inside of our business system. I am firmly not in the camp that is saying that it's not going to work. Like I see it working. I use it all the time. My kids use it all the time. It's like a tablet, or it's like, the cloud transition that we went through from on-premise to cloud. So this isn't something that I'm even hinging on my job, right, so to speak, in terms of business systems, because before I was a chief software architect, I understand software and design around software to be able to implement the best business solution, obviously, for a company. So once again, what I want to do is really want to just break into, obviously, this restructuring and this concept that's coming out of Microsoft, because I think a lot of people don't really understand what's going on here. They hear layoffs and they immediately think, oh, Microsoft is automating everything with AI. No, that's not entirely the story here. Once again, is there truth in it? Probably a little bit, right? And I think that that's what we want to talk about here today, to make sure that you understand if it's happening at Microsoft, it's going to happen at other businesses. And after those businesses happen, how does it trickle down then into smaller businesses that are in the market as well, right? And we want to make sure everyone is up to speed with that as we go through this. So with that, let me just do a quick overview, really, what Stoneridge Confab is. So I'm your host, Scott Frappier. I've been in the business system space now for about 25 years. I absolutely love business systems. I'm a glutton for punishment, as I like to say. I love to understand how we use these business systems to address the needs that really align with your organization's goals. And through my tenure, I've found that goals of businesses are all different culturally. Some want to make more money. Some want to do more time or less time when it comes to their employees. Some want the best systems. Some want the best run business. And others, like us, want to help our customers win as our mission statement. So really what I want to do here is on Confab, have an open conversation with you. I love feedback. I love to be told I'm wrong. I love to have a conversation a little bit more in depth as well on the topics that you feel are important. And today, we've got quite a bit of people that are streaming from also Twitch and YouTube. Obviously, I'd love to understand more of where you guys are at with everything, and kind of like what's next here, right? And Rob, you're right. I'm never wrong, right? I know how people think. That's the way I look at it. So with that, let's go ahead and just talk about Stoneridge Confab. So today, basically, we're going to be covering the restructuring that's happening at Microsoft. So it's a little bit of a different format because we're not just diving into the technical aspect of it. We're going to start looking at some of these news articles, right? And we're going to use AI as well to kind of summarize the breakout, obviously, of these changes. And we'll use, for example, ChatGPT as a technology to go through this and kind of share that. The thing I want people to understand just really quickly here, remember on Confab, every technology is used inside of the business system space. So while we focus, for example, on the Microsoft products, we also play around with Gemini, we play around with DeepSeek, we play around with all the different types of large language models because we need to know how these are used inside of a business system space, especially when it comes to the integration. Because there are some shops that are entirely Microsoft, there's some shops that are entirely Google or a LAMP stack as an example, and then there's a lot of us that are in between, where we find the right tool for the right job to have the right output, right? So say that right so many times, right? So what I want to do here today, obviously, is go through and just dive a little bit more in detail. And what I'll do is I'll share my screen and I'll have chat up, and feel free to add your comments. I want to know what you think. I've had a lot of conversation with even internal resources at Stone Ridge that have given me a lot of background as well on this, right? So what I want to do here is make this as interactive as possible. So like I said, feel free to stump the chump as we go through this. With that, let me go ahead and share my screen, and let's go ahead and tackle really the first topic here. Obviously, the cut that happened, right? So if you've been living in a under a rock or underwater or wherever you may call it, or maybe you've been on vacation for the last couple of weeks here now, as of July 1st, Microsoft has gone through and done a major reorganization inside of their business. And I think that this started leaking out around June 19th is kind of when I saw the public sources of data starting to come out stating that Microsoft was going through and doing a substantial layoff. Now, layoffs in our industry are never fun, right? Any industry, I should say, right? It's never a fun concept to kind of incorporate or talk about. But I think in my industry, one of the problems that we're starting to see are people are asking, well, why did Microsoft do this? And I think that there's a bunch of different reasons that we can talk about here today that kind of talk a little bit more in detail, really about what those are, right? And what I mean by that then is, what are we actually tackling here? Like, why all of a sudden did we have, for example, a substantial cutoff of jobs or a job cut in May, and then we've had another one now in basically June, July, right? It really kind of looks sus, as my daughter would say, right? So what we want to do here is just talk a little bit about that and understand a little bit more of that breakout. So first and foremost, like I said, Microsoft had a job cut of around 9,000 people, right, that were there. And when that happens, it gets people's attention really quickly. And what was really interesting about this, though, was the fact that a lot of the opinions that were out there in the industry were about, for example, if you go to Reddit, about how Microsoft's goal is not really being accomplished right now in terms of their revenue and financial picture, right? Because of this huge investment inside of AI business systems. And I find that kind of interesting. And the reason I find that really kind of interesting is that when we think about, for example, different types of technologies that are so intrusive or disruptive is kind of the term that's typically used. I've never seen a technology more disruptive than AI inside of the business system space. I've been in it for 25 years. And I'm not saying that because, once again, I want to sell more AI. I'm saying that because the way I've used it to automate different types of business system processes changes the entire way that partners and companies that implement software need to think about how to go to market, how to support a business, and how much more they can do faster by using AI-enabled systems, because just quite candidly, it makes it so that you don't have to write code, you write a prompt to accomplish the goal that you want to accomplish. Now, we're at the very beginning stages of this, right? It's a very, very much, kind of equate this to the cloud enablement that we went through basically at the start of my tenure at Stone Ridge Software, where Microsoft transitioned a lot of the on-premise based software applications to cloud. And that was extremely disruptive. I remember talking to partners pretty constantly at that time where they had geared around the model, as we called it. And the model is that we offset basically our services, our software, our services losses based upon what we would make inside of the software. And that was just a really different model that a lot of companies that you talk to used to be able to make it so that they could implement a business solution. Because if you think about it, back in the day, as I would call it, we would sell software at $3,500 a user. And then from there, a partner would make a margin off of it. And what we would do is we would be very aggressive then in our services to basically then win the deal. And when we won the deal, what would happen is that if we had things that we didn't have covered in scope, we would offset our software margin that we would have with the services to basically make that entire implementation profitable. And in the cloud model, this didn't work very well. We're not winning, for example, $250,000 to $1 million deal in one shot per se, where we get all that cash up front, get our margin, and then from there can use that margin to buffer change orders or just basically different types of issues that come up in an implementation. So the industry had to adapt and change, meaning most companies now are profitable off of services. But just really candidly, what happened back in the day is that a lot of the companies that were on-prem didn't know how to transition to cloud because they had built a practice and a process around profitability that was not true profitability. And once again, that has changed fairly substantially. But the reason I'm kind of giving you this insight is because what we're seeing here is a very similar concept to what we saw with on-prem to cloud. And once again, there's going to be a lot of people that say this isn't the case, it's not going to be big, and then there's others that are saying it's the best thing since sliced bread. I like to be in the middle with all this, right? I like to kind of focus on what we're kind of looking at here. So Donovan, appreciate the follow, and I have no idea how I have that little zombie up there. That's really cool. Interesting. So I've got a zombie follower. Let's go. All right, so let's go through and just talk a little bit more about this. So Microsoft is going to cut these jobs. So another sign of layoffs that are occurring, right, with this. And quite candidly, I'm just going to say it because I think the elephant is in the room. I think there's going to be more in the future here. I think that there's going to be other changes from the Microsoft organization as they rally really around this AI enablement within the business. So the first and foremost here, and this was posted on June 19th, or June 25th, June 19th for this particular article. And basically what happened is we saw that Microsoft was going through and making a change, and the focus then around this was to start focusing on the 9,000 people that were cut was a breakout by all these different divisions by Microsoft where staff was actually let go, right? And so you've got a lot of streamers, for example, that I pay attention to that may be gaming-centric streamers that were talking about how the impact was on Xbox and how Phil handled that. And I would agree with a lot of the streamers that are out there that I think the Xbox division has an identity crisis going on right now. But we're staying on the business system space, and one of the areas that the business system space had more of an impact with these layoffs was on the sales and marketing teams that were related to it. Well, why was that? Well, candidly, we've known as partners for a while that there's a lot of extra layers that are inside of the Microsoft organization. We've always joked around with this that it's always interesting to try to navigate those layers, and then the year after it's going to flip and there's going to be a whole different set of people that we're going to have to interact with. And this is just the commonality across all partners, I think in any of the Microsoft-based ecosystems, is that we have change that happens on the sales and marketing quite often to align obviously on the initiatives that Microsoft has. So one year it's going to be, for example, the Power Platform that we focused on to help with that growth and that revenue driver. The next year was Copilot. Now it's automated agents, right, as we go through this. So there's always a shifting that's going to happen with a large organization that then bubbles down obviously to us as partners that then interact with the customers and show what the capabilities of the solutions are. That also means that we get to temper this a little bit because we're hearing one message and then we see the market more directly, and we get to basically then help align those as we go through this. So one of the areas that we've seen a lot of fluff, as they call it, has been on the sales and marketing side, obviously, of Microsoft. And I'm not saying this, remember, there's a lot of good people that I know personally at Microsoft that have been impacted by this. I'm not at all saying that I don't believe that they should be employed at Microsoft. I'm saying that the reality is that when we look at the investment that's occurring with Microsoft, that the sales and marketing side of it is typically offset more with partners with the Microsoft go-to-market strategy. And this is a really important distinction. Meaning, Microsoft is typically not a direct sales organization. They typically, especially on the small and medium business side of their business, interact with partners that build industry solutions and then go to market, obviously, with those solutions. So when we look at this, there's a large majority of staff that was then cut from basically the sales and marketing areas as Microsoft focuses more on the technical sales support that we need as partners to basically go through and then support the organization. Because, once again, there is a monetary impact here that's happening, and this is where the truth happens in my mind when it comes to the AI investment that's going on. So first and foremost, these are going to be an exact type of concept that we're going to talk about. Rob, appreciate your posts. Never waste a crisis, right? More and more companies are willing to blow this place up, and you're right. Like, I think there's also the fact that if you think about the pandemic, there's a lot of investment with people that occurred during the pandemic because of the rapid trajectory of digital transformation that we tackled. I remember when it first started, I can tell you our CEO as well, Eric Newell, there were some tough days that we had initially because we were like, what the heck is going to happen here? And it turned out to be the best time period inside of the business system space for people that were going through and basically selling digital transformation or business system implementations, because everyone had to transition to work from home. So they needed, at a minimum, for example, the ability to connect remotely. And a lot of these companies saw the value then of actually taking their on-prem based systems and then bringing it into the cloud so they could access this anywhere. So the pandemic crisis then had a large influx of resources in the business system space that we didn't have before, that we needed quickly because we had to scale. The other example maybe that relates more to all of you, do you remember how bad Teams was when it first started? And then how all of a sudden all of the focus for Microsoft when the pandemic started was all about Teams? Well, there's a reason for that, because then we had to be more virtual. We needed to have the ability to see everyone on camera as we interacted, obviously, with our daily jobs, because everyone was remote, and it was now the pattern that we got into with it, right? So once again, this next crisis is the AI crisis, and this is why I want to talk about it, because obviously this is going to impact every single person that is in the digital computer space that interacts with data or interacts with business processes. And I don't want you to put your head in the sand, because I don't want to have our industry be like what happened with the graphic artist industry. We need to be talking about this, and we need to be in front of it. So the other one, obviously here as well, Rob was saying you're comparing on-prem to cloud to personal to using AI in terms of business application earthquakes. You named it. You absolutely called it out. I do think it's that foundational. And I would say the people that have done the investment that have moved to cloud are the ones that are immediately seeing the advantage then of AI enablement. Because remember, we still have a lot of customers in our platform that run obviously GP, which is an on-premise based solution, right? So once again, they're not getting the advantages of Copilot enablement inside of the business system space. So kind of the concept of ignorance is bliss is kind of true still for some of those users, but they're hearing more and more about it, and they want to know what to do with it, right? So once again, this is going to be foundational inside of the industry. And we're going to talk about why that is too in a second here. So obviously we've got these other cuts, right? So Xbox division was the major restructuring that was inside of here. I did this by just basically going into Google and doing some searches. or sorry, I went to Bing and did it, right? So, but anyways, around 9,100 cuts that were there. They didn't say exactly what was happening in terms of the divisions that were there. We had a 4% global workforce reduction. We heard as well that it sounds like Pakistan, if I remember correctly, was also closing. That's actually a newer post that happened today, if I remember correctly. But basically, there is a strategic repositioning to focus on strategic growth areas. So let's back up. Microsoft's a big organization, right? Do you think that they are all of a sudden betting the entire house, so to speak, on something that they don't see statistical growth around? No, I don't think so. As a business leader, what I would want to have would be some concrete evidence that increases in terms of either sales or what we call attachment of sales or consumption are driving obviously a lot of this future need. And it's not just like Mark Zuckerberg, for example, or we'll even take Elon, for example, or even Google and the Gemini team with it, right? You don't think, like, candidly, like, why are all these other executives investing so much in AI as well? Is it just a hype? If it was a hype, why isn't quantum being even more inflated than where it was for a period of time there, right? So I think you've got to back up a little bit and you got to say, okay, like, the similarities here on everyone that is chasing this means that there is some tangible output that is increasing. And what is it going to be with Microsoft? It's more than likely going to be consumption increase, either on the Azure platform or in the business system space with it. And what does consumption mean? Well, consumption is the number of transactions that go through the platform that they can bill. That is how the entire software as a service industry pretty much works. And so, once again, is it going to be too much in one way and not enough in the other way? It could be, but they're going to course correct as time goes on, right? And so this strategic growth is really going to start happening. And this is where then I look at like the Microsoft year-over-year revenue. So this is another one that I started reading and I was like, oh, okay, let's take a look at this as part of this. So Azure OpenAI usage in 6 months doubled. Okay, so these are the GPT models that are being hosted with the huge investment that Microsoft has been doing, right? So if you don't know how this all works at the highest level, I'll just explain it really briefly. Microsoft buys hardware from NVIDIA, from AMD, and from Intel. They buy usually what are called GPUs, graphical processing units. And the reason that they use GPUs is that GPUs have a very powerful way of basically doing what we call floating point operations, which are very long strings of numbers that then basically are used to do calculations. In the past, it's been video games, right? Vertexes and different types of polygons that are created that then you put a texture on it, and then from there you got a cool video game that you use with it. But what they have to do is they have to have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of numbers that are representing that scene or that picture. And what they found is that these GPUs are very good at doing what we call transformer architectures. And transformer architectures are what the GPT architectures are based off of. So, once again, that's why NVIDIA has won very big off of this, because they sell the hardware that then drives the AI industry, because they have a very strong design when it comes to silicon that can very quickly compute different types of numbers at a very high level of accuracy. And that is what is needed for us to use these general pre-trained transformer architectures that are then the ChatGPT or the copilots that are out there. So what Microsoft is doing is they're seeing, oh, our marketing is working. We're seeing revenue growth. And as we look here, even with that revenue growth, remember, there is also going to be a year-over-year growth that's happening. So pandemic, boom, look at that year-over-year percentage that we had that happened. Then we saw this as we got into 2023. Everyone had invested off of that pandemic boon, so it went back down. And then the outliers after the pandemic that had saved cost, for example, for a period of time because they were concerned of the impact. Maybe they were in the distribution or manufacturing industries, which could impact that, started to come back with their then digital transformation. So even at Stone Ridge, we saw a double wave effect that was felt inside of our organization. And then from there, it's kind of steadied, and it hasn't been as this monumental growth that we exhibited or saw. And then at the same time, we've had a slight reduction in up and down as the market has changed. But look at the rise again. That's happening for year-over-year growth, right? So once again, they are using these numbers to drive this. This isn't something that I'm just making up, and I highly doubt that Microsoft would bet the farm, so to speak, on a technology that they don't feel is going to drive additional consumption or revenue. And where are they going to get that consumption or revenue? Where they're typically going to get that then on the Azure platform, right? So if we look at this growth, we're going to see more and more of this. We're going to see more and more AI enablement for writing code. And while as a developer in the past, I understand like the concern of this of being like, oh, let's get rid of all junior developers. No, that's not the right answer, but we should be talking about it. And the reason I'm talking about it is because it's very similar to what happened to the graphic artist industry. They got decimated by these image generations. There's lawsuit after lawsuit that's going on that you've heard as well right now. And generating an image versus writing code, I don't know. Like, I get it. I get, like, you want to say really firmly in your mind that there is no way that a computer can write better code than you. But I think a graphic artist that came out of college said the same thing as a junior level graphic design artist, and a lot of them are in pain right now. So do we want the reality, or do we want the what we want, right? And what we want versus the reality is something that we as an industry need to continue to talk about, obviously. So the other thing here with that restructuring effort really is about this AI bet, right? This AI drive that we're starting to see. So Microsoft pledged $80 billion in capital spending for fiscal year 2025 towards expanding data centers and cloud infrastructure to support AI workloads. You understand why in the prior post, right? We got 65% increase in terms of revenue that we're seeing year over year inside of this. And now, suddenly, what we're starting to see is this huge expansion now in the capital spending for these AI-based systems. And here's the interesting thing that we're starting to see inside of the AI space. Initially, these AI-based systems, they were super, 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 super expensive. Like you heard it, Oracle was looking at buying a nuclear power plant to be able to run their data centers. And I bet you there's still some conversation around that as well, because the compute power needed to run these transformer architectures, it's massive. Like it is like we thought Bitcoin was huge in terms of the power consumption. AI, oh my gosh, not I mean, I'd love to see the stats. In fact, Chad, if you can find it out and post it, try to find out like the difference between Bitcoin energy consumption versus AI energy consumption. I'd be really curious on where we're at with that. But what's happening is that these transformer architectures are getting faster and faster and faster. So for example, the 4 model when it initially came out used a substantially amount more of compute than the 4 Omni. And then after the 4 Omni came out, the 4.5 came out, which was a research preview, which brought up that cost all of a sudden again because it was a very large trained and very bulky model. And then they came out with the 4.1, and yes, I know, these version numbers, they don't make any sense. Once again, this would be my biggest feedback. Make it so that we can understand the differences between these. Maybe have a low power consumption model and then have a high power consumption model and then keep the versioning at least consistent across those models. I don't get it. But anyways, what happens with the new models now is that they use less and less power. And how can you tell with that? Well, when you actually go through and spin up an OpenAI instance, you can see when you use the OpenAI 4.1 model that it costs X amount of cents per token. So the cheaper the tokens are, usually the cheaper it is to run that architecture or that GPT transformer. So once again, follow the money. More and more often now, we're going to see not just a combination of making these bigger models that are trained off of more data, but we're going to be looking at models that use less power so that they can scale more to do more with the hardware investment that they have. And this is just a fact of life that we see across all the different technologies that Microsoft tackles. So once again, the other aspect here is that we are looking at this top talent in AI that's been going around like crazy lately. We heard about what happened with Meta, right? They poached some of the OpenAI engineers, and OpenAI has gone through and done some restructuring to make sure that the trade secrets are not getting out. And the reason for that is because these models are extremely capable at performing tasks, and they know that, and they don't want those trade secrets to leak out. But Microsoft has a relationship with OpenAI as a primary shareholder where they are able to get those models basically 3 months after OpenAI initially publishes them. So once again, what we're seeing here is that as these new models come out, Microsoft is incorporating that into the Copilot stack. And there are some differences, and I just want to be super candid with that. Like ChatGPT is designed to be a conversational chat experience, whereas the Microsoft Copilot, we have that with Copilot Chat, which actually at the very beginning was not very good, but it's almost on par now with ChatGPT. But we also have a full API architecture where we can call basically with Power Automate, with any ProDev tools as well, these transformer architectures. Whereas if you go ChatGPT or OpenAI, you don't have that ability on the Microsoft stack to do that then, right? So there's a huge advantage when it comes to having this part of your core strategy inside of a huge application space that's already used by millions, if not maybe billions of users that are on the Microsoft platform, right? So not only now is your Outlook natively basically taking emails and putting it to the semantic index, which is a vector database that Microsoft manages on the background, but you're able basically to enable Copilot and it can access that data immediately. It's kind of scary in one aspect, but in the future here, it's a very similar concept to cloud, where all the data is in the cloud, and these AI systems just make it easier to retrieve that information and then generate content very quickly. So once again, we're going to see more and more of this happening as the AI enablement and as the recruiting of AI-based talent makes these systems better. It can do more, and it will have an impact, obviously, on staffing, right? So the other thing to note here is going to be the sales role changes, right, that we talked about. And basically what we're doing is we're reinventing how we actually tackle this. And the one thing I wanted to kind of highlight here is that there was a major restructuring that happened in terms of the business units or divisions inside of Microsoft. So before I say that, though, I want to see what kind of chats are here. Rob said developers embrace the use of Copilot to write the stuff. The best of them are inherently lazy and use whatever they can get their hands on, not reinvent the wheel. You nailed it, Rob. Like let's just give it an example. The developer that learns how to use the GitHub or the automated tooling to generate code is the developer that will survive this. Being in front of AI as a developer is the best place you can be right now. Not the developer that says, oh, AI can't do this, AI can't do that, AI can't do this. We couldn't generate really good images about a year and a half ago until the GPT image 1 came out, right? Which now is amazing in terms of the images that you can generate on ChatGPT. We all saw the wave of people, taking their pictures, and even on my Facebook profile, I've got images generated basically that came from that transformer architecture. Never would have imagined that a year and a half ago, but now we're able to do that. So what we're seeing for developers that are able to use these tools is that they'll open up and they'll simulate 5 different scenarios of code that they'll generate, and they'll have it pre-generated, and then they'll audit it. They still use their, the scaffolding is what they're basically providing, but then they're able to do more faster, and they basically then review the code and make sure that it's working correctly and then make changes to it. I've used it, for example, to do wise camera hacking back in the day, where basically I needed to create an SH script, and candidly, I haven't used BusyBox in a while. So what I did is I used GPT to basically go through and build that out and iterate off of it. And in what would have taken me probably 2 to 3 days, took me an hour and a half to create. So that's me using it, and it doesn't have to be perfect, and I'm providing the scaffolding and I'm providing really that input to be able to do it. But longer term, as a developer, there's not a doubt in my mind that you want to be in front of it to have that code generated, and then you're going to be really auditing it, and you're still going to make changes to it, and you're still going to say, no, don't do it that way, do it this way. But it's more and more common to see developers using it to write code, and that's going to continue to expand. The other comment here, AI systems are projected to consume between 85 to 134 terawatts, it looks like, annually by 2025, while Bitcoin mining currently uses about 120 terawatts per year, highlighting a significant competition for energy resources between the two technologies, right? So once again, one is scaling much more so than, in my opinion, the Bitcoin network has as well. So we're going to see, this is going to be interesting, if the investment around that from a corporate perspective is what really drives that. And then maybe, maybe what happens here is maybe Bitcoin will change to a different type of proof of stake, right, that they have. Maybe what they'll do is they'll move it to maybe even Ethereum with contracts could be used to have compute power for this. Like, I don't know if anyone's really thought through any of that, but it would be interesting to see how the industry goes with it, right? So I appreciate that. And then Joe, a power plant in North Dakota was going to close in 2020, but is now planning to build new data centers that will be essentially powered exclusively by the plant, right? Like, once again, the writing's on the wall here, right? So let's go through this really quickly of what's happening now in the business system area. So we used to have basically 6 different divisions in Microsoft that we worked through. Modern Work, Biz Apps, Digital and App Innovation, Data and AI, Azure Infrastructure, and Security. Right, those were basically the divisions inside of Microsoft. I've got a little slide here that I can show just to kind of highlight that. So here is kind of the layout of what happens, what was there in 2024 and what happened now in 2025, right? Where basically modern work is no longer here, right? And everything, as you can see, is AI. And security is an AI because obviously we're not just securing AI, we're securing infrastructure and different types of technologies that Microsoft has. But why would we change all this? Like, why would Microsoft do that? Well, there's an easy reason for it. Once again, modern work and biz apps go hand in hand. So what is modern work? Modern work is usually Office 365, right? And I'm overgeneralizing here, but it's going to be Teams, it's going to be Outlook, it's going to be Graph API. It's usually, I like to kind of equate it to the classic Microsoft stack, right? Where you are using Excel to do work, and then Biz Apps, which is also a division that Satya led back in the day, is what typically focuses then on the Dynamics brand, right? But also we have Power Platform and a couple other technologies that are inside of that Biz App area as well. And then Digital and App Innovation, Data and AI, obviously, Azure Infrastructure, we've all known about those basic capabilities as well. Data and AI consumption, like this crosses, as you can imagine then as well from a data perspective, Power BI, Fabric, and some of those different areas. Digital and App Innovation, obviously, these are dev platforms, right? So DevOps and things of that nature. And then Azure has been one of the biggest growth areas, as you can imagine, inside of the Microsoft stack, to become like one of the dominant cloud platforms that are out there, right? So pretty cool in that regard as well for capabilities. So what we're seeing here, though, is this transition. So the question you probably have, Scott, is, well, where did modern work go? Well, pretty simple. Modern work and biz apps went into AI business solutions. Digital app and data and AI and infrastructure went into cloud and AI platforms. And the security one was actually on here. It looks like I'm missing it in this graphic, but security was another one, and actually just might be truncated in my slide. But either way, security then, as you can see here, was its own as a part of it. So just as an example here, modern work and biz apps came together. So why is that, right? Well, pretty easy. It helps drive consumption. Like, let's start there, right? So, from a Microsoft perspective here, when you think about what autonomous agents are going to do inside of your business environment, they are not just tackling specific tasks that are inside of a business system. This is a really interesting and important concept that most people don't understand yet, but they're going to find out really quickly here in the future. And what do I mean by that? Well, stop looking at an autonomous agent as an agent that is in a specific technology stack, but as an agent that is more akin to a human being than a business system. I know, it's really weird. Once again, these concepts are hard to kind of get over because if you think about it, in the past, what you've kind of focused on has been when I build features or capabilities, I build them in the finance and supply chain management solution, or I build them on the Power Platform for Dynamics 365 sales, or I import data from Excel that's in a workbook. But these are all technical type concepts that are used that are not based in what the user does. They're based on the user's interaction with the system. And it's always with the system that we interact with that drives then the business requirement. So when we go through, for example, some type of implementation process, typically what we're doing is we're aligning what are the inputs and outputs to get to the result that's needed for the business. We're not typically talking about, well, how do you think through that concept? How do you actually drive X, Y, or Z throughout that process? What is it that makes you then pivot to go into Excel and copy and paste that into WordPad or into Notepad and then go ahead and paste that into Excel? Like, we don't talk about that type of stuff typically. Instead, we talk about you need to upload a file and then the user does all that work and magic in the background, unless maybe they bring it up and say, is there an automated way to be able to tackle that? Which typically we reply saying, yes, there probably is, using Power Automate, for example. But with these systems, we now have the ability to really replace, and I'm going to say it, to replace that workload user potentially. And what do I mean by replace workload user? Because once again, this is a really cautious subject that we in the business system space just need to understand that different leaders are going to have different mentalities around what they want to see AI drive in the business. And I really do, I hope that it's not staff reduction. I hope it's staff augmentation. What I mean by that, let's go faster. Let's do more. Let's have our resources have a better work-life balance as we go through really our processes. That to me is the ideal state that I'd love to see the industry get to. But you know the reality, there are going to be others that have a different mentality around this. So how do we get better at that, right? Well, number one, end users knowing how to use AI are going to really help them be proactive and also more value add to an organization. Once again, don't be the one that pushes back on it. AI and graphic artists, they didn't really make a really good dent with that. The book industry is going to be facing this. The narrator industry is going to be facing this. So where's the best place to be? Well, it's in front of it. It's showing how to use the tools to be able to increase efficiency inside of the organization. So think about it this way then. So when it comes to what we are going to be doing as a business, when we have an autonomous agent, that agent is going to do certain things that go beyond the business system. And those agents, right now, Microsoft is releasing as agents that are usually pretty specific to the business application, but longer term, they don't need to do that. Why do they need to do that? It doesn't make any sense to do that. An agent, if it's more akin to a person, what do we do to people when we need to train them to go into a different type of business system? We train them, right? I just said the magic word. So what we're going to start seeing more and more with this joining of modern work and biz apps is that we're going to have these agents that are going to be independent or maybe coupled to a degree with the business system. But what they will also be able to do are other tasks that span what you typically do in a digital space. So an example would be, instead of running a report or running MRP to figure out low inventory levels, what an agent will do is it will monitor a business event inside of Business Central or inside of supply chain management And when inventory falls below a predefined level that you set, such as a reorder point, it'll identify that item, identify who the purchaser is of that item, generate an email, notify that purchaser, state what the average consumption value is of that particular product, state what the price discrepancy or different types of sales prices that are there or purchase prices that are there potentially for that product from different vendors. And what a purchaser can do is they can reply in email or in chat or in Teams or wherever it may be to say, yes, go ahead and make a purchase order for that product. Make sure it uses this vendor, use this price point for it, and send me that purchase order so that I can forward it to my vendor. We do that right now. We have an agent that does that right now. And it doesn't matter if it's in Business Central or if it's in supply chain management. Think about it. It's the same business process. One of the things that I don't think people really understand inside of our space is the fact that business processes are fairly static in every single organization. If you look at an open systems solution, which is getting back there in the day, it's now Traverse, right? And you compare that now to what we have now, they did general ledger, they did accounts payable, they did accounts receivable, they did kitting, they did manufacturing, and it was a different interface, but it was still the same core business process. Yes, there are small nuances, like in terms of the fields, the naming of it, the values that need to be inside of there, but they're still tackling the same business process. So these agents become very critical then in terms of the business system space and joining them together, because now not only are we having an agent that monitors a business system, which would be biz apps, but it uses modern work to generate the email, and it uses that then to communicate like a person to the actual end user, the purchaser, that doesn't have to log into the business system to perform the action. Instead, they reply via email to do that. This is the new concept that Satya mentioned. AI is the new UI. AI, artificial intelligence, is the new user interface because you use it to then go into the system and to do these actions as part of that. So this is a extremely different concept. And right now, we're at the infancy of it. But I will tell you, moving forward here, it's going to explode. Why is it going to explode? Well, it's because of a different technology that we're going to talk about really quickly here too, which is the model context protocol. Super techie, right? Great, great, great. It's like, okay, fantastic. Scott, this is way too much right now. Model context protocol. Imagine this. It's a language that AI can talk to other AI agents around. Okay, and so this is a really, 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 really important concept. My opinion, just to kind of start here, it's not a popular opinion, but I think it's a real opinion. This isn't the best thing for Microsoft. It really isn't. And I'm going to say it in one way, and I don't like, once again, this is the business aspect of it versus the openness aspect of it, right? I believe in open technologies. I really want open technologies, but I also know that MCP kind of makes this more of a competitive landscape, which great for us. We'll be more competitive with it, obviously, but you know, OpenAI has the transformer architecture, right? And you don't get access to that transformer architecture. Well, there's some of these trade secrets that are there. Well, MCP kind of just makes this almost fully open in terms of what you can use for your digital stack. So use the consumer, you win. It absolutely is a win. Partners and Microsoft and all that kind of stuff, it'll be interesting to see how that works, because I think the other concept here will be the fact that we're going to have to figure out how to let me move this over here real quick. We're going to have to figure out the fact how we actually moderate this really effectively in the future with all the different competitive solutions that are out there. So what does MCP do? MCP basically is a standard that AI systems can use to then identify inside of like a business system, like what does data mean? How can I access that data? Imagine it like this. If you're inside of Business Central and you click on things to do a particular action, MCP should be able to expose all those different types of actions that an AI system can do for you. So longer term, that is like the vision really of what MCP at a very generic level could tackle, because it gives you the awareness of the business system so that you know, for example, that if you're inquiring about your customer data inside of CRM, well, when it accesses the MCP service that provides that, it'll map the account table to the customer table, for example. So it provides some of those tools and capabilities to be able to drive that. And then it supports that metadata to be able to basically index properly that data so that the AI system can get to it faster. We usually call those, like on the Microsoft platform, it's a semantic index, basically a vector database, so that way it can access the information very quickly and easily. So what we're going to start seeing here is not only autonomous agents that are built with the Microsoft platform, but are built on other platforms as we go through this. And what do I mean by that? Well, Anthropic has Claude. Well, what you could do is you could set up basically an autonomous agent on Claude that would then go and access Dynamics 365 data using MCP. And you don't have to then define all of these additional APIs. You don't have to say that the account table is the customer table. You don't have to do any of that type of stuff. Instead, what you can do is you can basically point to that endpoint or the MCP endpoint, and it will then tell the AI system what information is here and how it can be accessed and how it's typically used to provide that context then for that particular AI system. So what this means then is that we're going to see agents that are not just agents that Microsoft builds, but that any company builds. And so the power here, once again, comes into the agent being able to mimic more accurately what we do in our business process to basically accomplish that goal. And like the purchasing agent is a perfect example of that. Maybe you don't want to have it sent to the purchaser. Instead, the purchaser reviews it again and they say, yeah, go ahead and forward this on to the supplier, and it will send that then directly to the supplier and carbon copy that purchaser, right? So these agents are going to be really important, and it also means, in my opinion, that in the business system space, that our biz apps, so Dynamics 365, Business Central as an example, you're not going to implement and spend, thousands and thousands of hours customizing the system. You're going to basically implement the template, the database of business processes, so to speak, in your business with these business systems. And then you're going to invest in the AI automation need that's there. So we're going to see a services shift where there's going to be less services that are typically for the biz app that you implement, which has classically been, you think about implementations, all of us have gone through it, right, that are probably on this channel. Well, they're going to flip. It's going to be less services, more templates, and more industry-specific solutions that are used then for the biz app, and then more investment around AI and automation, because you can scale that then faster than you can scale, obviously, a business system. And the value that's provided then off of an agent that has some basic level of reasoning and content generation and logic around it is far superior than having a developer code a Power Automate for every given scenario that you have inside of the business application. So once again, these autonomous agents, that's the reason why they're being elevated. Right now, maybe it's 5 to 20% that you get for an efficiency gain, but in the future, that efficiency gain, as these systems have more access to the data, as they have more ability to look at the patterns of what's being outputted, is going to increase. So you're not going to see, obviously, the opposite with this. And quite candidly, it makes sense to me. Most customers that we interact with, they want, tell me what the standard business process is that's inside of the biz app. Here's what it is. Okay, that fits for 80-90% of the situations. And during some discovery that we do, we may identify 10% of the differences that we have to then have a conversation around to maybe reconfigure, for example, just generically. Maybe you don't do three-way matching because you don't do inventory receipts, but you want to do a two-way match. So that way the purchase order is matched basically to the purchase invoice at a minimum level, but you didn't do any type of product receipts. once again, there's different types of matching levels that we can configure inside of these business systems. And then from there, well, maybe we do configuration changes inside of the template that we created to support that unique requirement. But what we do is we tell you this is what it is out of the box, which helps reduce then that cost of implementation. But then you see the value of the investment in the AI system, which is going to then allow you to configure it to do whatever you want that person to do as part of that business solution implementation. So once again, they are going to be coupled hand in hand pretty commonly, but the market is going to shift a lot, in my opinion, as we go through it. And my opinions aren't always right? So we'll see what happens, but I will tell you, I see the vision here with it. I see how that makes sense to a lot of business users. And kind of the last thing here too, like how would impact the business systems, right, for MCP? So once again, we've talked about these complex integration scenarios where we ask questions of data, and one might be in an ERP and one might be in a CRM. Well, if we're able to get MCP connected to both systems, do we have to do that integration? We talk about the swivel chair effect, right, that we would build an integration around. Well, if I have an agent, can it just do both of them? So I don't have to do an integration? Can it do the checks and balances to keep them in sync? So that way I can have two separate systems? Like, these are areas now that we start getting into that weren't really possible before that become more possible, where the role of what the activity that is done from the end user is inside of the agent, and the business system is a database, right? Could you move from a SQL Server to MySQL? You absolutely could. So does that make it then so that you could replace your business system and then have the AI system very quickly and rapidly support that? Not yet, but why couldn't it? Why doesn't this become more modular in terms of the architecture? Because if it's designed to be able to support these different business systems as an agent, and you just have to reconnect it to the plumbing, for example, to the business system that is AI enabled with MCP as an example, we're not getting that far off then, because MCP allows you to do every action you could do as an end user long term inside of our systems. So once again, this might be pie in the sky, but it's going to start happening here, and it's going to start doing the future proofing that's related to it. All right, I know we're getting to the end of time here, so let's go ahead and go back to our just chatting just really quickly. We've got some really good comments that came out here as well. So, Joe, you also said a true co-pilot that allows you to offload these types of tasks while you can be more effective with other areas. You nailed it. Like, once again, that's where we're seeing that immediate advantage here when it comes to the business system space. So once again, I really hope that this has kind of been, challenging for you in terms of where this industry potentially is going. And I say potentially because here's the fact of the matter. For 2025 and 2026, I think we're going to see a bunch of agents that Microsoft is going to create, right? I think honestly what's going to happen here is that we're going to see just a plethora of these that are part of the release waves that are going to be here, because if they're unifying it into this AI business system type space, well, agents are the best use case for GPTs. It's not data analysis that they're the best at. It's these autonomous agents that they're the best at. So once again, I see this being really core to Microsoft, where not only are you buying then the business system, but you're also then buying, for example, the automated agent. And what is that going to mean for you? Well, it does mean that there's going to be consumption cost. These agents are not free per se. They're going to have a charge for every transaction that they process. But I will say this, you're going to have to look at the cost increases that you'll get as well as the cost savings, because the digital space to do this will typically be cheaper than human labor. Not always, but typically. And as the models become cheaper, that cost will go down as well. So you need to be thinking about that, because where we are now versus where we were even 2 years ago, instead of 3 cents per 5 or per 100,000 tokens, we're down to like instead of 350 per million tokens, we're down to like 11 cents per million tokens. That's a power reduction, right? So once again, we're going to see this scale as well. Rob, you're right. I could be wrong. Yeah, I could be. I don't think so though. Not with this. So, anyways, thank you all for your time. We really appreciate it. Obviously, 2 weeks from now we'll have the release notes that hopefully will be out that we'll be going through. Really love obviously the feedback as we went through the stream here today as well. Too bad LinkedIn didn't work, but if you have anyone that you know would be interested in watching this, feel free to point them to our YouTube or to our Twitch channel, as this will stay up there on stream. And with that, everyone have a great rest of your week, and we will talk to you 2 weeks from now with hopefully the release notes that we'll be going through. So talk to you then.